Here's my take on Dutch people and racism. From my experience in the Netherlands and with Dutch people in general, I think that Dutch people pride themselves on being modern and advanced. And I think at first glance, it may appear that they are that way. But the more I spent time in Dutch spaces, the more I realized that this was a facade. And here's an overwhelming problem that I have in Europe, is that I think that a lot of Europeans sort of look to these very superficial ways in which they are better than everybody. Like, depending on which country you're in, they're usually not religious, they're usually well educated. But regarding issues of race and racism, they are very much behind. And I would argue that the Netherlands is probably one of the biggest examples of this. An interesting thing is that I was called the N-word in Amsterdam. Just minded my business and someone's grandpa decides to call me a. And the funny thing too is whenever you talk about being called this word in Europe, they're always like, well, we don't know what that word means. It usually means something different in our language. It doesn't actually mean the same thing as what it does in America. It's bullshit. They know what it means. I think that Dutch people are very prone to microaggressions when talking to a person of color. But at the same time, I think when they're comfortable around you enough, they have no issue saying something racist to you. I've talked about this in previous videos, but my Dutch host family had a Dutch tutor of Indonesian descent. And I really liked him at first, but there came a time when he felt very comfortable saying very racist things about the Moroccan house cleaner and Moroccans in general. But the funniest thing is, if you pass him on the street, you could probably think that he's Moroccan himself. I also remember when my Dutch host mom told me that there is this neighborhood in Brussels that she would never go to. She'd never take her children there. And it turned out that she was talking about the largely brown neighborhood called Molenbeek. And I remember the first time I actually went to this neighborhood, I didn't even know I was there. And I thought it was a really cool neighborhood. It reminded me of some neighborhoods back in New York City because they had a lot of variation in the types of fruits that they were selling and different restaurants as well. And I asked my Belgian boyfriend at the time, I was like, what is the name of this neighborhood? And he was like, Molenbeek. And I was like, oh my God, this is the neighborhood that my Dutch mom told me to never go to. It was so dangerous. Literally nothing was happening there. And so one thing I do want to say is I think that Dutch people largely are okay with being racist, especially towards brown people and also specific types of black people, because I think a lot of them justify their barbarity or just not being as good as them with their proximity to religion. And so because Dutch people and Dutch culture is also largely anti-theist, they sort of use this as a justification for discriminating against certain populations. I've also said this before, but when talking to my Dutch host mom and Dutch people in general, I always got an air of arrogance from almost every single one of them. And I don't think that there is a culture in Europe that I have experienced yet that can match this sort of arrogance. They genuinely think that their culture is the most upstanding. And with this arrogant mentality, I think it's very easy for racism to easily proliferate. Another thing is that Dutch culture is very status obsessed. And so because they're status obsessed, they place less value on poor people. And of course, due to systems that exist in the Netherlands, there are certain people who are likelier to be poor. And so I think when I was in the Netherlands and also with my Dutch host family, I was having to navigate a lot of these social things that in the end made me feel very uncomfortable. Because another thing, I feel like if you were to confront someone and tell them that something that they said is racist, they will just find a reason to explain why it's not. Because they can't possibly be racist